Hi, and welcome to Astro Bites for Tuesday, the 10th of September, 2024. So, remember to stick around for the word for the day because we're having a week of personal self-development. But what about the astrology today? Because I know some of you come here just for the astrology and some come here for both, and maybe some of you only come here for the word of the day. So, here we go. Well, in the early hours of this morning, the moon that represents the people, it represents our intuition, it's about self-care, love, it's about the nurturing of the self. But it's moved into the fiery sign of Sagittarius. And since the early hours of the morning, it's been squaring Mercury, newly arrived in Virgo. Remember, Mercury is our planet of communication. Now, whilst Mercury is in Virgo, especially whilst it's still in shadow, it can make us more anxious, more into that kind of state of ruminating and overthinking. And that's just going to go on for a few more days. Not long. Honestly, soon it's going to be out of shadow and then it'll be in new territory. And we'll feel a lot better. Any news that has been kind of held back from us, if we've been waiting for important information, it'll suddenly come through. If we've been trying to connect with someone that seems elusive and distant, that will all resolve itself. So we'll be able to connect with the things and the people that we want to connect with. And Uranus, of course, our planet of the unexpected and shocks, is also making still this square to Mercury. So don't be surprised if you hear surprising, shocking news on the world stage. There is a sense of energy building, especially now that Mars is in Cancer, where it struggles to breathe, where it struggles to exert its fire and passion and energy. And because it's squaring Neptune retrograde in Pisces, I get this feeling of problems at sea again around this week. Now, that could be situations to do with building tensions in our war zones. So the sea borders of certain war zones like the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, that kind of part of the world, and also the Black Sea. Is it the Black Sea I'm thinking of? Yes, that borders Ukraine. And that energy is coming into my thinking, and Crimea, as if there are going to be some maybe attacks on Ukraine from the sea again, where they had kind of calmed down. So that energy is around. But what about on a personal level? How's today going to pan out for us personally? Well, I think today we're going to be a little bit more reflective, maybe reflective about, as I say, news we've been receiving, news that is coming in. And I think also we're going to be feeling a little bit more upbeat about personal finances, because I think the markets in general today are going to be turning to a more positive way of operating, whereas they may have been a bit negative in the last few days. So on the whole, there is a sense, especially because Venus, that is in Libra, is moving towards its trine with Jupiter in Gemini. Remember, Jupiter is about luck, opportunity, expansion, Venus can be about the economy, and in the event chart, it's in the second house of finance and economy and anything to do with luxury. So there is a sense of building energy and of a little bit more, feels like you can take your foot off the accelerator a bit, and just enjoy cruising at this kind of level financially, and that you can begin in your mind to get a sense of how your budgeting can unfold for the rest of September. So that is a lot of what the energy is around today. There are no major energies building, but there is energy coming that we are going to be noticing. So I will come on to that later in the week. So that is what is going on astrologically. I think there is still, as I said, inner reflection. I think there's a part of us today that is just going to want a little bit of alone time to kind of just process what goes on for ourselves and what goes on in our personal relationships. So let's come on to our word for the day. And as you know, I'm having a week of personal self-development as our theme. And so I thought there is a word I need to use, or a feeling or an experience, which I don't think anyone ever doesn't feel at some time. And for some people, this can be a crippling condition that really never seems to go. So the word is anxiety. Woo, this takes us down a big, deep rabbit hole, anxiety. What triggers it is rumination, worry, fear, dis-ease or unease about the future, things that could happen in the future. And yet, it's kind of a normal reaction in stressful situations, because it's actually a very primitive feeling that we need, because it's actually the intuition telling us that there might be a big grizzly bear outside the cave we live in. So it's a kind of, we have to have our sense of anxiety, our sense of awareness that something dangerous might be around, so that we can go into those two parts of this, which are fight or flight. So, but the problem is what happens is we don't need it in the same way anymore, because most of us, well, some of us are lucky enough to live in, let's call it, safe zones. We have a roof over our head, we have electricity, we have food in the fridge, and we have access to water and power. People that don't have probably had to overcome their feelings of anxiety, because they just have to go into survival mode, because things are out of their control. And they say, anxiety is when we're worrying about the past or worrying about the future. We're worried about what we might have said, or we're worried about what could be said or what we could do, or how that will unfold. We're not living in the present when we're caught in anxiety. And there are many kinds of different forms of anxiety. And they each have their own kind of set of symptoms. We can have generalized anxiety disorders where we will persistently and excessively worry about all sorts of everyday things: work, health, the kids, relationships, being on time somewhere, keeping appointments, money, anything like that. And what usually happens is the worry is disproportionate to the actual situation. But the trouble is it's got out of our control. So the anxiety pushes us into this state where it's enormous. Our fear and worry and paranoia is so out of control that we can't contain it. And, you know, it's an extremely crippling condition. One of the very simple ways to try and manage it is to obviously stay in the present, but also to learn to live with uncertainty and not knowing. And that is the biggest problem for people that suffer anxiety. They find it very difficult to actually manage uncertainty. Because the fact is, nothing in our future is certain. Nothing at all. We have a calendar, we have a diary. Our smartphones or watches tell us when our next appointment is. But it doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen. I mean, you know, the problem is we're all so used to having a kind of ordered existence that when it gets out of control, it throws us into a generalized state of complete and utter panic. And that is another symptom of anxiety, a panic disorder, where we have panic attacks. And these attacks can come without warning. And they involve physical symptoms. Chest pain, so then we think we're having a heart attack. Shortness of breath, dizziness, all of these kind of symptoms. We can have a social anxiety disorder where we will avoid going out and mixing with people because we're frightened that we're going to be judged, or we'll do something that's embarrassing, or we'll feel humiliated in front of others because we might have a panic attack. And then we'll feel stupid, or we'll say something that people will go, oh no, I don't think so. Because it makes us feel we're back to projections, where we are caught on the receiving end, perhaps, of a projection. We can also have anxiety, of course, about specific fears, phobias, heights, fear of flying, fear of spiders, fear of grizzly bears outside the back door. And then what happens is it leads us to avoidance. Oh, I don't really want to travel at the moment. I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy being here, because you know you've got to get on a plane and you don't want to get on a plane. You know, with regard to that, I used to have a really serious fear of flying, because at one point something happened to me on a plane where the plane appeared to have a problem, and we had to circle several times, and this took an hour to burn off excess fuel before we could make an emergency landing. And I had the most awful anxiety and panic attack. And that then gave me my fear of flying. Anyway, I actually had and I think I've told this story before actually, because I had a hypnotherapy session, just one. And because the hypnotherapist, and I can still remember her saying this, said, every system has a backup system. Every backup system has a backup system too. And it made me realize that flying is actually incredibly safe. So that helped ease my fear of flying and my anxiety. And the other wonderful comment that was made to me by a British Airways stewardess once, when I was having a bit of a panic attack and standing by the toilets waiting to go in, and she was saying, "You're right, you look a bit," and I said, "Oh, I'm just having terrible anxiety attack. I keep thinking, it's not going to, how does it stay up here? We're going to crash, we're going to die, we're going to die." And she said, "Do you think the pilot would let this plane off the ground if he wasn't sure 100% it would get us from A to B?" And I thought, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that. And she said, "And another thing, don't you think that he wants to get home to have supper with his kids and family?" And that made a huge difference to me. So there are many, many forms of anxiety that I'm not going to go in depth in, but you know, you've got obsessive compulsive disorder, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder, you've got separation anxiety, and you know, the physical symptoms of anxiety can be absolutely crippling. And it can also be triggered by problems in our chemical imbalances in the brain. So anxiety is also associated with depression. But I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to go down that particular rabbit hole. But there are ways to help anxiety. There are many ways. And, you know, if anyone does have particular problems with anxiety, I can tell you I'm an expert on anxiety because it's a problem I've suffered with all of my life. And I have now learnt to manage it. Sometimes it'll creep up and catch me, but most of the time I've got it under control. So if you do want to talk to me at any time about anxiety, book a session. We can have a look at what triggers it off in your chart. Go to my website, pennydix.com. And I don't have many sessions available because I like to keep my client base very small, because I want to give you the best of me. And if I crowded in my days with lots of clients, none of you will get the best of me. So you will notice there are very limited time slots available, but you will get the best of me. So let's bring today's long again Astro Bite to a close. Whoa, gosh, well, they're getting longer and longer. Anyway, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I look forward to being back tomorrow with yet another Astro Bite. Bye for now.